Hey, Masa.
Hello. How are you
I'm doing all
doing?
right. Now that technology is working, I guess my phone is going to be a better option than the laptop. So hopefully,
Yes.
yes.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Sam had just put in the chat, is he on his phone? And unfortunately, we do not have the Instagram technology enabled for laptop, and
Okay.
it is optimized for mobile. Um, so so glad to see your face. We've gotten a chance to talk a little bit, which I'm really excited about our creating space today. Um, I will let you introduce yourself in just a second to give folks a little bit of sort of personal extra background. Mike Trepper actually, apart from the formal introduction that he will give for himself in just a second, Mike was actually one of the caring adults who was part of my life when I was growing up as a young person, as a teenager. I went through the Anytime program back in 2001, and Mike was, along with Tara Woodard, was one of the co-directors at my session of Anytown. So we go way back. It is great to share space with you in this way, and to be able to be a colleague now at a different point in time because of um, folks like yourself who have worked in youth development and youth empowerment and cultivated folks like myself over the years. So thank you for that. And I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce yourself a little bit.
Well, thanks, Masa, and thanks for having me on. And it is always a pleasure to connect with you. And it was a pleasure to spend that time many years ago, almost 20 years ago, at Anytown and the years after. Working together in partnership. And so I've always said, as much as perhaps you learned from me, and maybe I was a mentor to you, I have learned from you. So it's been great to see you grow, and I've learned so much. And to have you as a colleague is even just more impactful. So thanks for having me on. And 20 years in Tampa Bay. Doing work in youth development and community development with a variety of organizations, and teaching at USF, and just trying to continue to try to make a positive impact, where I can, and work with solid individuals and organizations like CTB and yourself and others who are perhaps watching or out doing this work.
Awesome. Well, for this conversation today, and just to kind of give folks a heads up, we've had kind of like some interesting conversations where, and prior to this, we're almost setting this up as quasi creating space, quasi hard conversations, almost live and with other people, in the sense that we've had some difficult conversations in the past, where we've held each other accountable. I definitely know that you've held me accountable and helped me to grow. And so I think, especially now when there's an uptick in conversations among white folks around anti-Black racism, we at Community Tampa Bay, we are doing our own Let's Talk About Race series, or Let's Talk About Racism series, and how this permeates all of our institutions, particularly the violence in policing, but then also opening up conversations around how systemic racism is part of every aspect of our lives in all these different institutions. And so just because we might not be in one particular space in policing, for example, does not mean that we do not perpetuate or participate in white supremacy or racism. And so for you, having done this work for a while, what are some of the conversations that you're having with folks around white allyship right now in particular?
Yeah, I think a lot of the conversation has been about what do I do? I'm a white person, or I'm a non-Black person of color who wants to do something, because there is this need to want to do something, which is very, very positive. But the conversation a lot has been about what does that look like, and how can I go about doing that respectfully, but also still feeling this need to make a difference. So I feel like a lot of people, and a lot of the conversations I've had are that people are really, white people in particular, are sort of, they're really clamoring for resources, for action items, for action steps, to contribute. The challenge with that, as always, is it authentic? Is it now the time? And have they done any individual work, and then in order to really contribute sort of at the macro level? And that's been, some of the individual conversations that I've had, but even organizationally with a couple other organizations and just community groups, et cetera, and really trying to find places for them to plug in. And as well as I do right now, there's a lot of places to plug in. But I think doing that with really good intention is still so crucial, because some of that work and some of the work that people want to do right now could be more damaging to relationships, to individual relationships, to organizational relationships, and just the community in general. So I feel like there's still proceed with caution in the conversations that I've had, and because good intentions can only go so far, we really need to be strategic about what we're doing.
You said in one of the things that you just said actually made me think, because I've been thinking about my own conversations with folks. What are some of the ways for maybe some of our white and non-Black, POC folks who might be joining in on this conversation? What are some of the ways that sort of unintentional or non-strategic allyship or attempts to do good, or attempts to let me join in on this conversation, let me try to help in some way, how can that be damaging? What are some of the ways that what are some of the conversations that you've had around the impacts versus the intent?
Sure. So I'm gonna kind of follow me on this. But I've been thinking a lot about, and we saw this again reign its really ugly head with the Ahmaud Arbery situation and his murder in Georgia months ago, now almost a month ago. And that whole scene right there was sort of this, we saw this white vigilantism come through because people had to protect their neighborhoods, of course. This is what the mantra is, that there was this young Black male in the neighborhood and he shouldn't be there, and these sort of things. So this rush to protect and to this law and order, et cetera, it's been a common theme in America for a long time, especially in white neighborhoods, and we see it. But that same feeling on the other side of it, where well-intentioned white people and non-Black people of color who want to jump in and fix right away, they want to help, they want to fix, they want to serve. It's sort of like this same mantra, this need to kind of go and do something, and it's sort of this Western cultural idea of having to sort of fix right away. And I'm not painting people who want to fix as the same as those individuals who murdered Ahmaud, but the sediment we have to really think about, and sort of seeing how that sediment to jump in right away and fix, or to just jump ahead of sort of the movement, so to speak, or go without really good direction, is as damaging, because again, it perpetuates this sort of need for whiteness to sort of to overtake and to control and that law and order, so to speak. And so it's crucial that white people and others in that sense really understand that, because their intentions are not going to be seen as such. They're going to be seen as just as that, wanting to jump ahead and control and fix. And that is something that perpetuates, I think, a lot of people who are well-intentioned and trying to do good, but they end up sort of disenfranchising people. They end up on an island, and they set really things back. And surely it doesn't do anything to really dispel and really dismantle sort of this white supremacy, this sort of white need for law and order, and fixing, and that missionary ideology that we often talk sort of in these circles about, just the need to fix and control. And so it's really that's kind of what I've been seeing a little bit. I know we'll talk a little bit about that woke washing and some other things that have been going on, but that's kind of what I'm seeing out there. And we're trying to really trying to say, hey, slow down, to just people in general and white people in general, and slow down. Let's dialogue on these issues. Where is the movement going? Where can we look to people of color who are leading these dialogues and movements, and let's partner with them instead of just doing things on our own.
I think that's definitely something of a concept that I think definitely in our work together in terms of like youth adult partnership and everything, of thinking about like, what does step up, step back look like? What does it look like to be in solidarity versus I know better, and so I'm going to fix this now that I'm here. I'm going to be able to solve the things when people have been fighting and struggling and doing the work all this time. There is that hubris of coming in and saying, I'm able to. The only thing that was missing up until this point was me and my voice, and there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, and Masa, I would just say that the other piece to that is, and yes, we have to move on, so to speak. You know, there's a moving forward sort of movement, of course, with now more policies and sort of action items. But there's also still a lot of frustration and anger, and I think white people are not comfortable with that. White people are not comfortable with anger and frustration and discourse, but that has to be recognized, and it has to sort of, even if it has to continue for a bit and let it run its course. Because again, we can't always just jump in and fix. Sometimes there has to be silence. Sometimes there has to be anger and discourse. And for the majority, I think of America, or not even America, or a lot of America right now, where people are still frustrated. They don't know what to do with that anger and discourse. And that's, I think, where we're at right now, is seeing that people are saying, well, just stop all this stuff, and we need to get to action. But there's still anger and discourse that needs to be shared and voiced before perhaps we even get to the action.
Well, and I think in particular, I think not even thinking of it as a sequential thing, right? Of I need to work through feelings, and the feelings are something to overcome and to separate out from the action. It's one and the same. The microaggressions and all these different things are embedded, and so the action is. It was interesting. I actually just saw a post recently. What you just said made me think about this. Of like, there are a lot of folks who are ordering books from Black-owned and Black-run bookstores on like white fragility. And there was this incredible observation that because these are small local Black-owned bookstores, and a bunch of people are ordering these white fragility books to educate themselves. And it's like, great, good job on educating yourself. And at the same time, they're getting upset about the fact that this small independent bookseller is not getting their order right away. And so the response to ordering books on white fragility is the sense of like, how dare you not meet my desire and need right at this very moment? Like, what's wrong with you? And it's like, hold on, missing the point entirely. Like, in you trying to take action or do your thing based off of what you think is right. Or what you need to be taking action, what you need to be part of this process, you are still participating in the very institutions, the very structures that we're talking about, and perpetuating that. So kind of in that line, I know that, for both of us, right, we definitely are on our own individual journeys when it comes to that as well, of like understanding how do we fit in, how do I fit into the concept of whiteness, into white fragility, into that sort of saviorism complex, and on all these different things. And again, with consent, with permission, with comfort, whatever at your level is, what are some of the conversations that you were having beforehand? Because I know that you've had conversations around race and racism before, and how is that different in engaging some of these conversations now? Like, what's changed for you? What has been your learning curve, and what are some of the things that maybe have come to light about your own approach and your own actions and behaviors in relation to how do we participate and perpetuate these systems?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, and again, I'm not that seasoned as far as in age and whatnot, but 20 years ago, when we were having these dialogues and talking about issues of race, and going into various organizations and corporate entities and government entities back then, and even before that, people, we didn't know how to talk about these issues, and unfortunately we still don't know how to talk about these issues. And I think so that's something that has stayed the same. That just this past spring, I taught a multicultural course and diversity course, social justice type course at USF, and my students, they certainly didn't know how to talk about issues of race and ethnicity. And seeing that, even in various organizations that I'm involved with, don't know how to talk about race and ethnicity and these issues. And so that is something that's been very, very similar, very constant. That it's still very taboo and people don't know how to talk about it. But I think what's changed though, is for me in particular, that on a learning curve as well. And so perhaps 15, 20 years ago, I would be more quick to sort of jump in and give my perspective. Oh, well, here's what I think. But with growth, maturity, and learning, and having good mentors and colleagues and friends to be able to be held accountable with. And so more so these days, I'm asking questions and listening, and trying to provide more space, as something like this. And I appreciate CTV for doing this, providing more space for people to have those tough conversations, and to really just be a facilitator in that. And when appropriate, and when asked, or when appropriate, to share my perspective, because I think there's still a need. I think there's really a need for even individuals like myself, white male, to speak and to share, experiences. And there's a lot of white people and non-Black people of color who have a lot to share and have a lot to learn, of course, but have a lot to share, that perhaps they don't often feel welcome to, or they feel like they're not going to say the right thing, or they're not going to be listened to, or etc. And I still feel like we need to make space for them as well, and we have to make it for them to, or certainly listen, because I need to do more listening, but certainly to share a little bit about their experiences, because in the conversation where we're all trying to head, I feel like we need to know what they're thinking, if anything else. And so that's, I think, kind of where these conversations are at today. And the last thing I would say about that is, I've come across so many people that are in interethnic, interracial, interreligious relationships that are really, really struggling. And I think that's, I think that's something that, we haven't. I think needs to be more space for that. They're really struggling personally. They're struggling with their relationships in their workplace, and that's again because in our spaces we don't know how to provide space to have these kind of conversations.
In that, what you were saying of kind of, again, because I think what you said of making sure that we are actively engaging in the conversation, again, like not shying away from it, not retreating, because that's part of the issue, right? Is the fact that, like you said, in 20 years time, you haven't really seen much of a difference in how capable people are, in particular, white folks, are able to engage in these conversations. At the same time, I think that this is maybe then where I would love to hear sort of your own experience or perspectives on how you've navigated this, because there is that nuance though of navigating, okay, there is an importance for white folks to speak and engage this conversation, and what are the appropriate settings and circumstances under which to do that. So again, navigate that between, again, taking up space where it's initially our conversation around like, all right, like I'm with it now, like great, like let's go, 0 to 100, like I'm here now, the world is saved because my perspective is here. That extreme versus the I'm never going to say the right thing or do the right thing, so therefore I'm not even going to engage the conversation. What is the nuanced navigation that you have experienced, and then also maybe where you've seen other white folks navigating in terms of where their starting point is and how they're navigating those conversations so that we create safe spaces for everyone as opposed to having white folks occupying space.
Yeah, I mean, I think I always find it fascinating that, and we know, white people talk about issues of race and ethnicity and data. They don't talk about it in feelings and emotions and experiences, or at least they don't start like that. And so, if I'm sure all of us can surf our feeds and those sort of things and see white people posting things. Well, look at these statistics and this and that statistic and whatnot. So I think first of all, we need to be able to find spaces where white people can move beyond that, and we have to help them. We have to help them connect to not only the experiences, emotions, and feelings of what people of color and people who are historically oppressed feeling and going through, and not just now because of the last couple weeks, because that's another issue which we can talk about, but historically, systemically, etc. So we have to help them connect to that. But I believe that a lot of that connection also has to come from them connecting to their own experiences, and so. For instance, we talk about the aspect of privilege, and this is sort of this shifting sands metaphor, where you're in privilege in one area and not in another area. Being a white male, non-Christian, I can kind of speak to that a little bit because being a non-Christian in a Christian-dominated society, there have been times where I'm like, wow, I'm the minority, but I know for certain that I'm the majority in every other category. But for a split second, I can at least sort of see, okay, wow, I sort of can sort of affirm kind of what people are saying and experiencing because I've felt like this at certain times. So I think the more personal that we can make it, and in a way that make it a way that white people and sort of and I would include, and we talk about the non-Black people of color who are who have privilege and power. We need to make it more personal, make that space available. And I certainly agree that there's certain people that are just never going to get it. They're not going to get it, unfortunately. But there's a whole lot of people that want to get it, and maybe and that question. And real quick, the question of why are you here now? Why is this such important to you, an issue to you now? Why are you all of a sudden sort of ordering those books and hopefully not, and then complaining about it? But but why are you ordering those books? Why are you? That's certainly a valid question, and I think we certainly can ask that. But we also then have to ask, well, is it better that they're here and not somewhere else? And that's, I think, the question. I feel like it's a legit question because there are people that want to be in these spaces, but we're just perhaps don't have the opportunity, or don't feel like they can have that opportunity, but want to contribute in some way.
I think a lot of what you're saying is resonating, and I see that Set Mohammed Moore, hey, in the comments.
What's up, Set?
Thing on to or fleshing out what you just said of like the facts versus the lived experience piece of it, saying yes, it has to connect to something embodied, or it'll remain too abstract to fully grasp. And that's something I definitely resonate with myself as somebody who occupies a lot of privileged identities. And then at the same time, I'm like, how do I start, even if I don't fully understand, how do I start to step outside of my own lived experience, using some of my lived experience as a starting point. Seth also says it's not about making it felt, but making facts felt. So how do we make
Yeah.
the realities that other experience felt and through our own understanding or through what we were able to understand to some degree as a starting point.
Yeah, and I think there's and share you a quick story. I have a really good friend that you know, is I would you know, probably more on the conservative side, and probably voted for Trump. Which, if anyone's watching, voted for Trump. Okay, we can talk about that later. Hit me up after. But this gentleman, you know, posted something about, you know, his business, and hey, if you loot my business or if you do this or that, you know, I'm going to unfriend you and this and that and the other thing. So you can see where he stands. But this gentleman also did something that is probably one of the most radical things that you can do around juvenile justice issues. There was an issue that he was involved with, and he refused to call the cops on this young black male. And he said in particular, because I know that this could, his interaction with the police could lead to, you know, this gentleman going on that line, because we know the pipeline, we know the statistics, and if you don't know the statistics, you need to look them up. And that's one of the reasons, you know, why, you know, there's, you know, DMC, this disproportionate minority contact, you know, we know, and he did, when he did that, that is a potentially life-changing situation for that young black male. And we need, there's a lot more people out there like that. And so we need to be able to garner individuals like that and people like that and bring them into these kind of conversations, because, you know, it would probably surprise a lot of us who are saying, well, you know, where have you been, kind of thing. But maybe they've been there all along doing these types of things that have been, in some sense, that we need to, that individual movement right there is perhaps more life altering than perhaps some of the other things that are going on that we're thinking about, policy and changes. But just that simple act of not engaging with the calling law enforcement could really avoid a lifetime of issues for that young person.
I'm sorry if I think I got just like cut out just a little bit there, but what I'm hearing from what you're saying is this, that yes, we can talk about policy and all those things, and at the same time, like, how are we internalizing that in terms of what are the everyday actions that I can take, or I am or I'm not doing and engaging in, that has radical impact on lived experience for people of color, particularly for our Black community, our Black friends and family. And I think like this also gets to that challenging piece of in a sense, it's like when we're talking about having these conversations, there is that spectrum of privilege, or there's intersections of privilege and identity here, and definitely a lot easier for yourself or myself to engage this person in conversation around some of these issues, as opposed to you know, where at the same time, like, if you are not going to negate my existence to my face. And I think like that is a key factor, is how do we use space to be able to engage in some of these conversations with folks. With I want to shift the conversation just a little bit, because I think you mentioned so there's definitely the individual acts, but then there's also organizations, and what organizations are doing, what we can do as part of organizations. And you had actually shared a term with me. You had mentioned it earlier at the very beginning of this, but you had actually shared the term with me, and I hadn't heard it prior to you bringing it up, called woke washing. And so that was something I was just like, wait, I don't know what this is, but like, I think I know what this is. So I looked it up, and what it is, a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, institutions are using symbols to claim allyship and support, and washing over concrete policies, concrete practices that would make real impact, right? Tangible impact on defending and affirming Black lives. And so, for example, you know, I myself have gone to some of the protests, and I know, that we had a very, one instance where you have the mayor marching with protesters on one day, and then sending out police and calling the National Guard to tear gas protesters the next day. So that very sort of concrete thing of what does it look like to have this sort of symbolic act to show, hey, this is where I stand on this, versus what is your actual policies, what is the actual decisions, and what is the impact of that. And so as someone, Mike, who's been in leadership roles over the years in different organizations, what are some of the shortcomings of organizations or institutions in practicing real allyship as opposed to woke washing? Like what are some of the limitations there?
Well, first of all, and I think you and I agree about that term woke, and I think we can get that out of the way about that. We don't tend to use that, but yeah, this term has come up, and I'll give a shout out to my partner Liz for engaging in discussion about that. And the lingo always is always fascinating, but so the sentiment is is still the same, and I think again we have to be very, very careful and have to ask those tough questions about. Look, we know, or corporations are savvy. They know that injustice and discrimination and police brutality and these sort of things are bad for business. I mean, they know that, whether they act on it internally, and I think that's the question. So I think that's the what are the internal actions that are going on if you're putting out statements and changing your logos to represent pride flags, or or putting fists in your logos, or whatever it may be. If you're trying to co-opt the movement, for your corporate gain, or your organizational gain. So I think the question really is, let's look beyond that. I mean, and let's hold accountable these entities that are doing that by asking those tough questions about, well, what does your board look like? What are your hiring practices? What are your movement practices as far as advancement opportunities? What does what do your policies and procedures say about childcare, about education opportunities? Those sort of questions, I think, are very legit, and that we can hold organizations accountable for that. And there's more, of course. So I think. Again, as we talked about kind of at the beginning, organizations, just as individuals, can perpetuate myths and stereotypes and sort of this continued, oppression of individuals and entities, just by being, if they're not constantly looking at themselves internally. And self-reflection is a major piece to this, even at the organizational level. And there's a lot of great organizations. There's a lot of, and we know some of them, and there's others that are not just nonprofit, but government and entities. There's a lot of good organizations that their missions are big and bold, but they also have to take a good look at themselves, because they can do better. And I think that's the sentiment of doing better, is what's really crucial right now. And there's ways to do that. And I think for the other last thing to that is getting their employees and their constituents and people who support them involved in that self-reflection, because they're going to know best on what the temperature is in their organization of how are we doing around these things. But all of us can look in, let's say, 5 to 6, 8, 10 months, 12 months, in a year, and look back at some of these organizations that were very vocal this last month, and changing their logos and all these sort of things to kind of reflect the movement. And let's see where they're at then. And we'll have a right to say, hey, where are you now? And I think that's another important question, when we get to that.
I think that's, I see in the chat, Seth says, yes, run those receipts, run us those receipts. So definitely like that piece of, we can be very vocal, we can advertise, and at the end of the day, like what's the fine print, what's on those receipts. And fortunately, we got some awesome folks in our community who have very good memories and very good documentation to run us those receipts. from your perspective, and again, I know that this might be a tricky question to navigate. So definitely, like, within comfort, or within what is institutionally you're able to do so. Are there ways that you have seen shortcomings in organizations that you have been part of in terms of how the what we say versus the what we do, there's a difference or mismatch?
Can you hear me? Because I think you were breaking up a little bit there.
Sorry. Yes, I can hear you. Do you need me to repeat that?
No, I know. I think I know what you said. Yeah, I think what I would say to that is you know, nations tend to do things that are not reflective of their mission or their core values. And I'll just, I'll give an example of, organizations that kind of like what we talked about just a little bit ago, where they're quick to kind of jump in and to want to fix and help. And I think that's a piece that is not unlike many organizations. And I think also when that attempt to do things is siloed, where there's only one aspect of leadership or one group or one individual even sometimes doing those things, and we forget that the things that we're trying to model, meaning that if we're trying to give voice to the community and provide more space for community voice, then in some of these organizations we need to do that first and foremost within our four walls. Then in order to say, wow, we can do this here, let's also partner with the community to do it there. So I think that's oftentimes some of the decision making and the voice that is not provided within organizations is something that's a major shortcoming, and that ability sort of just to be siloed in the approach. That's certain for sure. And I think a lot of organizations, just have to get out of their own way. That they're too nuanced with trying to always say the right things or always sort of walk this line of, who can I not piss off or whatever it may be. And it's tricky. It certainly is. There's a lot of things at play with organizations and even at the business level. But there are just some things that have to be non-negotiable. And Black Lives Matter and other issues of social justice have to be one of those things. And so organizations have to be able to work past that and have internally before they into the community. Community is not going to be, it's not going to be well received, and they're not going to be as forgiving. Can you hear me, Masa?
I can hear you now. I think, are you?
We lost touch there.
Oh,
okay. Are we back?
We were doing so well. We're about to wrap up. I see. I like the idea of following up. I'm definitely taking careful notes on the orgs I follow and am part of. Quote, they need to get out of their own way. Yes. So definitely this sense of there's this parallel between sort of our individual action as white and non-Black POC allies, and also organizations. It's like, how much are we? What are we doing in terms of what is our intention behind our action and in practicing allyship, what is the intention behind that in terms of, and the impact behind that, in the sense of, am I doing this because it looks good? Am I doing this because I want to not step on any toes and I want to make sure that I am fitting in? Or what am I really, what reflection am I really willing to do to tap into my own values as an individual, as an organization, as an institution, in order to actually be in solidarity, to actually practice allyship with the folks who are doing the work. So I see another comment on here. Thanks for staying on the path all these years, Mike. Keep pushing. So some affirmation for you there. And I think with that, before the connection continues to stutter step a little bit more, I want to just kind of to wrap us up there, but want to pass it over to you to if there's any final reflections that you would like to share, or any insights.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Masa and CTB for having me. You know, it is good to connect, and I appreciate the space. And yeah, I mean, I would just say that, especially for allyship is kind of messy. There's not a lot of it can be messy. I just put it like that. But you have to step into it. You have to lean into it, and find people that will support you. Allies also need allies. And so that's really crucial, that if you're feeling like you can't, you're not being a good ally, or if you're not, living up to the expectations or whatever it may be, then, look for resources, find other allies, check in with the people that you're being an ally to, and keep checking in with the organizations. I really like the comment that someone made about, staying on top of those organizations and helping them to get out of their own way, because that is crucial. Right now, especially, we have to make a dent in our own circles, and that's really important. We have that in that power and that sort of in our own sphere of influences, as it said. And those things that we do will make a difference, even though sometimes it may not feel like it. But those things will make a difference, to keep pushing. And I'm not totally sure who that was, but I appreciate that sentiment about keep pushing. And we're working, and a lot of this stuff is done sometimes outside of social media, outside of, I know you and I have had that conversation, Masa. Some of this stuff is done, in small conversations and perhaps boardrooms and other places, and other spaces. But we got to keep pushing, because it's important. So again, thanks Masa for having me on.
Thank you, Mike. And just to kind of close us out, this is Mike Trepper. Mike, do you have a ways to get in touch with you? Drop your info, whatever info you want to share.
Yeah, sure. I'm on Instagram at mtrep188, and just give a shout out to the 305 Miami. That's where I grew up, and 188 is my street. That's where that comes from. But yeah, mtrep188 is my Instagram, or you can reach me on my email, which is old school, so don't laugh about this. It's Mike Trepper at AOL.com. Okay, so AOL.com. That's we go way back. But that's just trying to keep it real. So Mike Trepper at AOL.com, and if you feel free to connect, reach out. And I think someone else had made a comment, I'm not sure, but but if there's any other follow-up, Masa, you can feel free to send it my way if they want to connect.
Absolutely. We'll post once we sort of upload this onto Seth says I laugh. Team A, I'm seeing as well. But yes, in terms of following up, another comment, I'm interested in learning from others who have made healthy moves to hold organizations accountable to auditing policy and making anti-racist changes. There's a lot of politics in that, but it shouldn't hinder. And so definitely, I think that would be a great opportunity to connect with you, with other folks, and anybody else who has maybe some of those stories of like, what does that look like in practice, and like how to navigate. That might be something if you could, once we post this stuff on YouTube or email us, get in touch with us. We are going to also post a link to our survey for watching this, so that you can leave us feedback. Ashley, our AmeriCorps, and that lets you know what you would like to continue to see from these creating spaces, but then also leave us positive feedback, leave us critical feedback, all the things, so that we can continue to improve. With that, I see Team AOL so dead, and yes, thanks. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Mike, and we'll chat again soon.
All right, great. Thanks, Masa.
All right, great. Thanks.
Bye. All right, fam. So thank you all so much for joining in to today's Creating Space. We will, again, please do the survey. We really would love your feedback. Stay in touch with us, connect with us. We actually have community circles that we do every day, 10 a.m., 8 p.m., as well as we have our Let's Talk About Racism series that we are doing on Mondays and Wednesdays on our private Zoom call. So if you're interested in that, go to our website, register, sign up.